Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. A lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. And tonight I've got a very special guest on, and her name is Viv Vermaak. Now, Vivian is an award-winning investigative journalist, writer and director. She writes articles for Daily Friend. Viv is perhaps best known for being the most loved and most hated presenter on Going Nowhere Slowly, South Africa's most popular travel show. But regards playing the tall germ Terry in Mina Moo as a career highlight. She is currently a creative director in the advertising industry and a columnist on the side. She does jiu-jitsu, so you don't take Viv on, that's for sure, and has a red 69 Chev Impala. Viv aims to establish herself as South Africa's first dismotivational speaker, and in the near future, dismantling much of the hubris so prominent in today's motivational speakers. Well, there you go, and tonight we're going to be talking about solar hot water panels, and are they worth it or not? Very interesting discussion. Here we go. I'll get Viv on. Hi, Viv.
How's it, Scott?
Excellent, thank you. Excellent. You still got the lights on, I see.
I do, and I'm very grateful so I can fix my hair quickly.
Ah, you look gorgeous.
Thank you.
Now,
Okay.
I believe you had a community meeting outside tonight. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I had to rush in. Scott, we just had a meeting at my substation in Germiston. So I don't know if your listeners or viewers know where Germiston is, but Germiston is in South Africa, or to be more technical, the gatkant of South Africa. So it is a town associated with gold mining and workers and the working class. So I stay in a suburb that if there's economic turmoil or shifts, that we see it first. And my community meeting was about the fact that nobody in the street has electricity again, except me, because I have solar. Some people, correct. So I have to lead all the poor people in the dark to come in here and have this interview with you in the light. But it is an interesting situation, and I know you wanted to speak to me about my article about solar for the Daily Friend.
Yes.
But yeah, it was just curious that I happened to leave my poor community members in the dark while I'm sitting here in lights, complaining about solar, but being grateful for it at the same time.
Without solar, we couldn't have had this meeting or this live stream.
100%. So can I ask you something? I know it's a Skype interview and traditionally you don't move the camera around, but I live in an interesting house for this topic as it happens, because I have 4 generations of power supply in one row. So is it okay if I pick the computer up and the camera work will be terrible, but I want to give people a sense of in South Africa now, or especially when you're like me, a middle class person, that you have to have at least 5 options for electricity. So I'm going to show you, technically Eskom is plan A, but if Eskom is plan A, it's not really a plan. Plan B, solar, plan C, generator, plan D, gas stove, and then you have other things. So do you mind if I show you that
Please,
quickly?
go ahead.
If your camera work to be terrible. So this house, I think, was built in the 50s. So now you're going to see, I'm going to pan it from left to right. Now there we will have an old gas fitting.
Look at that
and
old one. That's an antique, isn't it?
There we go. Well, not well. Watch your words, young man. Okay, so there's the hole for the original coal stove.
Yeah.
The original coal stove was in the corner. I think that was from the 50s to the 70s.
Wow.
Then the 70s, this was a Murava, very fancy installation there. As you can see, very fancy. And now, of course, we have solar and we have the inverters there and the batteries. And I have a changeover switch, which is used, generator, solar, and Eskom. Sometimes none of them work and you wish you still had the coal stove. And on days when you don't have sun or Eskom, I use the gas stove, and sometimes you even have to go over to the solar things. So the answer I have for people, and what I wrote about in the article, is that you have to have a plan A, B, C, D, and E. So no one solution is perfect. But Eskom ain't it. In South Africa, coal generated, not because coal is a bad solution. Eskom ain't plan A for a lot of us, and people must be comfortable with having an eclectic mix of solutions if they want power.
I love that eclectic use. I can see you're a writer.
Yes, so that was an interesting history of this house, and that I have at times in the past 2 months I have to use all of the above just to be able to have power, to live a life that's uninterrupted by load shedding. For me, my reality, I just could not abide by this national psyche of every time there's load shedding, oh God, no, I can't work again, and there's 2 hours of power. To do that to myself, that mental torture was just too much, and I invested in solar, which is not without problems, obviously.
Yeah, I've heard that there's a lot of solar panel theft happening in South Africa now.
Yes, so let me get onto the article, I think, which first alerted you to me. I wrote an article for the Daily Friend.
Yes.
And the title was, "You can take your solar and put it where the sun don't shine."
I love that.
And it was the most popular article in the past 2 years with 50,000 views. So you can go to the Daily Friend for the article. But just to get people, because solar is just sold to us as this magnificent and cheap and green and great solution. Well, not that great. Look, it's a solution, but I think you have to start, take the rose-colored spectacles out of your eyes. Firstly, it's how can I say? It's like democracy. It's not perfect, but it's still better to have it than not have it. But it favors the rich, and the poor can't afford it, and that's exactly like democracy. But you'd rather have it than not have it.
Yeah.
So if you want, I can take you through my main observations or solar, or we can talk about other things also.
Well, let's talk about your main observations about solar. But before we do, I just want to make the observation that, think about this. You know, they talk about plastic bags in trash heaps and stuff like that, the big problem they've got with those. Now, solar panels only last for about 10, 15 years, and then you've got to replace them. Now,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
now there are millions of solar panels up around South Africa. Where are they going to put them? Because they once you throw them out, where are they going to put them?
It's a disaster, and that's one of the things I wrote about. Is solar good for the environment? And I said, but I'm one of the people who fell for it because it's green. And now you go out and you look at the sun, and the sun is green and organic, but the things on your roof are not. And I'm just surprised how I fell for the hype. Because when you look at those solar panels that you mentioned, it's not biodegradable. It's from things that are mined out of the ground. It's metal, it's plastic, it's all of those things. And they don't last as long as you say. So I am now part of a system that's going to fill our land heaps.
Exactly.
And but how did I not see it? That's what I'm thinking. What the hell? How could I not have seen it? And that's part of the hype that I want to warn people about, that we can be blind and think the things on my roof is actually the sun. It's not. Those things are not the sun. The sun is clean and green. The things on your roof are not.
Yeah. In fact, they're going to be a real problem in the future.
Absolutely, and that's where your petrol systems or your generators are still greener simply because they're not adding to manufacturing processes. Look, they're terrible, but they already exist. So at least you're not adding another layer of damaging stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what I can say about petrol system. Nuclear, of course, is the cleanest, but it's expensive, and it's expensive to build the plants, but they last longer, and we don't have an existing infrastructure. So that's the other observation in terms of electricity, is there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs.
Well,
So
I think
no solutions, there are only trade-offs.
yeah, I think the nuclear option is really, really sensible, and because
100%.
it's nuclear, there's this sort of we can't go that way, radiation, but it's effective. It lasts for a long, long time, as you say, and it doesn't damage the environment.
Not at all. So you look at Coburg, we know how long now, 40 years.
Yeah.
So the entire west of Coburg will fit into a tennis court, and you dig it into the ground. So it's really an excellent solution for us, and we have that example in Cape Town anyway. So I hope people get their minds around nuclear. It's a much better solution, and these things last forever. So the other thing about solar, of course, is, well, can I jump back to my point? What about solar? Do you want to talk about
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead. We'll
Okay,
come back
so
to nuclear later. Go ahead.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so the first thing you must understand about solar is that there are no solutions. That it's only a trade-off. It's not a perfect solution. It's also not a one-to-one replacement for electricity you get from coal generation. So if you install a solar system, the power you get from that is not the equivalent to going to the wall and switching the light on from that old DB board I showed you. So listen, by the way, that old DB board, because I had a quote now to get my electrics wired, the young generation, the appy, Scott, you should have seen his face. He walked into the kitchen. And we said, listen, we have to rewire this thing now. And he walked into the kitchen, literally, I'm him now.
Yeah.
No, wow, hey, I've never seen anything like that, Listen, you're standing in a museum, show some respect.
Yeah,
Anyway,
no, that's probably worth a lot of money.
well, I don't know to whom. It's a lot of money to me to pay them to fix it into a modern style.
You'll find Eskom's got a museum somewhere, and they probably would love to have something like that to put in there.
It's in my house. I must start charging $5.
Yeah, for people to come and look at it.
Yes, why not? Anyway, so solar is not a one-to-one replacement. So you'll find even with bigger solar generating systems that you can't just switch the kettle on, you can't do the tumble dry, and you can't do the oven. So people who have solar only really have it for lights and plugs. I have an entry-level system, so a small system, a 5 kVA system. I paid about $60,000 for it, and that was a cheap price. But 60,000 Rand is a shitload of money for most people, and
Yeah.
it's not going to get you off the grid. Even for a small household, you're looking at 200, 250 to get you off the grid. And
Wow.
then, of course, it don't work when the sun don't shine.
That happens a lot in Gauteng.
Yeah, people forget about that one. So it's a lovely backup solution, but it's not a one-to-one replacement. Then the other thing is, well, they sell it to you that you will save on electricity bills. Yeah, you'll save on the electricity bills, but only when you've paid off the system. And for most people, $60,000 is a 5 years investment for most middle class people. So you don't really save; you're replacing the bills. The other thing you have to watch out for with solar is they lie. The lithium-ion batteries don't last for 10 years. They might show some power for 10 years, but the capacity at which you need the battery to run, which is 100 to 80%, will last you 2 to 3 years. So it's just be careful. When you install the system and the guy says they last for 10 years, well, you're going to replace it in 3 years. Look at the guarantee. So it's not what it seems. Then the other main
Can I
thing
just
people,
can I just
Yeah.
interrupt there? The
Yes,
other
yes.
thing with lithium is that it's mined, and
And
in Africa, it's mined often by slave labor, and
yeah.
people don't realize that. And lithium is very damaging when you mine it, damaging to the environment. So you're actually destroying someone else's environment to save your environment. So you're actually not doing anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how we're blind to these things because it's the sun. Scott.
Yeah.
You look, and the sun is there in the sky, and it's beautiful. So you're literally blinded by this sun worshipping concept.
Yeah. Sorry, what,
Okay.
your next point?
Sure. So that was the lithium-ion thing. Then the next point is that in South Africa, at least, it's still a new industry, so they don't have a maintenance mindset. So you have guys who used to be plumbers and electricians who don't know old DB boards are suddenly solar installers, but they don't have an infrastructure to service you. So if you have a complaint or whatever, they'll never come back because he's one little bucky that he has to install panels is more profitable to him than sending a guy for 2 hours to repair a system. So we don't have an industry yet that regulates itself, like the plumbers and the electricians have an industry that you can sort of understand there's a standard. And these guys are just exploding. It's a gross industry, and your after-sales service is terrible. So all of that is still fine, by the way, but be aware that you're not going into solar and all your problems are solved.
Yeah, but I also heard that in South Africa there's a lot of scamming when it comes to solar. Not just in the pricing, but also in, you pay and then nothing gets delivered.
Absolutely, but that's because the industry is new, so people are making it up as they go along. And then also people are greedy and they need you to show off with their solar. So people get caught out because they want to go and brag to the people at work that they now also have a solar system. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that meme that was famous in South Africa. There's a shack in a township, but there's a BMW parked in front of it. That's solar. For many people, solar is that fake Louis Vuitton handbag. It's a status symbol that you must have, but you can't really afford it and you shouldn't have bought it.
And the other thing about solar panels is you get different quality. So, if you get poor quality, it's just, you're wasting your time.
Absolutely, and there's no easy way for you to learn your lessons. You have to just go through it. If you have, look, in my area, we go through days and weeks without power. So for me, it's a solution. But honestly, if you're living in an area, 2 hours load shedding a day, dude, that's not a problem. Why are you spending 60? So if your problem is 2 hours a day load shedding, you ain't got a problem. The people in South Africa are people like me or my street, where 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 40 days. Now it's worth an investment. 2 days a day without power, don't even complain. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but are you having these extended outages or load shedding several times a day now?
Yes. Okay. So our situation is, I am blessed that I'm living in the street, blessed and cursed to live in interesting times. So we have all the problems that you can have, including, I don't know how to talk about this without making it a whole new program, including people who have basically captured the street by taking over the supply.
Have you got like a camp, a squatters camp near to your street?
We do have 2 kilometers from our street, but that's not that. This is just people who decided we can control people by controlling the electricity.
Oh, wow. So,
Yes,
they're actually cutting out cables and stuff.
Oh, yeah, no. So, so it's complicated, but we might do a different program on that. But if you have, but I do predict that with the canary and the gold mine, that this type of thing will become more common, and that's not a problem you can solve by putting pressure on a councillor or by paying your bills or by Eskom, because it's a different dynamic. Now, then for me, solar is a solution, because I don't live with the pressure of the other people in my street. They can't cook or they don't have lights. I don't have that because I have solar. So for me, now it becomes a solution. There are other social issues with having solar, is that you stand out in the crowd.
Yes.
Everybody's dark and hot. So now extraordinary resentments built from the people who don't have. So it's a fantastically beautiful and complicated situation that I'm in.
It's like wearing a gold watch when you go out, isn't it? People say, oh, she must be rich.
Oh, 100%. Yes, and the people who don't have, when the phases trip at the box, the yellow people got upset the other day because the yellow phase people, there are 3 phases, yellow, blue, and red.
Yeah.
The yellow phase people burnt out, and the yellow phase people were so upset. The yellow people wanted to switch everyone off just so nobody could have electricity.
Oh, wow.
So now you understand.
Yeah.
So now you understand the deliciousness of my predicament.
It's never dull in South Africa. You've got to admit that.
No, you have to admit that. And then I'm thinking now, when I came in for this meeting, because now for the Skype with you, because I switched, and people lie about solar, and I didn't realize I became one of them. It's just I lie about different things. So I didn't want people to know that I'm blessed with this abundance of electricity, but I had to switch the blooming lights on when I came to speak to you.
Yeah.
So it's like operating in darkness to be incognito and kabam, and blazing lights with the people in the meeting outside. So that's one way you lie about solar, is if you pretend that you're not privileged enough to have it. The way other people lie about solar, and I can promise you, you're going to be one of them in South Africa. When you have solar, you'll probably exaggerate. So people, what they do, the most of the lies is like when men talk about the size of their cars, right? Mm-hmm. That you exaggerate certain things. So with solar, you'll exaggerate how much output you have. So you pretend, no, you're off the grid. No, my solar, I can do anything, we're off the grid. But they lie. 2 minutes later, they will admit the geyser is still on Eskom, or they have to put the generator, or they can't do this and this. So they lie about the output, and they present how much they paid for it. So no matter how much you paid, they always got theirs for half price. So they say, so it becomes this bragging competition, and the real costs are hidden and the real outputs.
Well, the crazy part of all this, Viv, is that, if you're going to get off the grid, you can't just depend on solar panels, even if you cover the roof with them, because if it's a cloudy day or it's raining, then you're not going to generate any power. So you need to have that generator, which is going to burn diesel, which is not green friendly. So you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, aren't you?
Sure, and also solar is extraordinarily expensive, and people, and only the people who say it's not are so rich it doesn't matter. We had a guy complaining that his solar, he basically pays nothing for electricity, and we asked him, how much did you pay for the system? He says $1 million. I said, do you understand the problem here?
Yeah.
You can't claim you pay nothing for electricity if your investment into the infrastructure is $1 million, and he has a maintenance budget of $15,000 a month. So it's not really free, is it?
No, not at all. Now, Alan says in the side chat, "Hi all, I have been off the electric grid with solar for the last 7 years and will never go back." Would you ever give up your solar panels if you need to replace them?
Would I give them up?
Yeah. In other words, give up solar.
Well, it's a lovely thing to have. That's what I'm saying. It's like democracy. But I would never be solely dependent on it, because I think there are also efficiencies with petrol or diesel. So I'm sold at the moment on a mixture of solar, generator, Eskom, and gas. Oh, by the way, I have a Plan B gas geyser also.
Okay.
I feel comfortable that I have my options covered there.
You've got just about everything.
Yes, Plan A, B, C, D, E, and sometimes F.
And one of the things that is important when it comes to solar panels is that they've got to be, if you're in the southern hemisphere, they've got to be facing north. And I've seen people who get so frustrated because they've got this huge, beautiful tree in their front yard, and of course it casts a shade over the roof. So they can't put up solar panels because they don't get any sun.
Absolutely, and people forget that it's just, I'm not saying to people solar is bad or that it's anything wrong. I'm just saying it's not what most people think it is. And you have to think about trees, and you have to wash the things, and you have to think about where you put them up. And when you have a panel like me and you have your little inverter, your little control panel, you do look at it the whole day to see how much has it charged. Can I use the kettle now? We don't know about tomorrow. Oh, crikey, the electricity cartel has been up to their tricks again. I'm using the gas. So it's a more engaging system, let's put it that way.
Yeah, you've got to be creative. You've got to be creative.
If you do it like me, or you have to be independently wealthy, in which case we're not even having a discussion. We're talking now about people like me, or middle-class people who have entry-level systems, which is what most people think going off the grid as an entry-level user. It's not going to happen that way.
Yeah. Now, I guess the most important thing when it comes to bringing solar in to your environment is to do your homework, because there's so many things you've got to work out, like how many panels do I need if I'm going to get so much electricity, which way we're going to put them up, and there's a whole lot of stuff. Do you want to take us through the sort of homework you had to do when you went on to solar?
Yes, the only homework I can tell you is to prepare that if it's your first time, it's like buying your first car. You'll never know what the real homework was until you've bought it. But speak to as many people as you can and try and understand as much of the technicals as you can, because it's also fun. Because now you're learning about watts and volts and amps and stuff. It's a whole new way of thinking about things. So try and engage yourself in the technical component, get at least 3 quotes, and get a gut feel for the person who stops in your driveway. Do you get a sense that they will come back to fix your stuff or not? Make a judgment on the size of the company of whether, and ask them, listen, do you have a maintenance team? But people go for the quickest and the cheapest because they forget with Eskom, the council already does the maintenance. So you don't think about that. Think about maintenance beforehand. Think of in your quote, because of course you're going to compete for the cheapest one you can, so you can brag to your friends. But is it installed in a way that if you had to get a certificate of compliance to sell your house, that it would pass the test? And most of them won't. So add $15,000 to your bill if you want it to be compliant, not workable, compliant. So make all those sums and talk about it a lot and read about it a lot and do your sums and have fun.
Yeah.
And understand you're not going to burn your fingers. That's just the way it is.
I guess a good way to learn is to go to something like, I hate to say it, but YouTube, and just type in there, what do I need to know when I buy solar panels or get a solar system? Because there'll be so many videos about that.
Yeah, there will be, and you still resent the decision afterwards. It's like buying a car. There are too many variables to have a simple solution.
Yeah. Now, with these points, there were quite a few points that you had regarding solar and why it's not cut up for what it's to be. Do you want to go through some more of them?
Let's see. Do I have more of them? I think I've done a lot of them. Okay, so I've spoken about it's not a one-to-one replacement in terms of grid electricity. Okay, but let's go to another one. You won't save on your electricity bills, or you will only save once you've paid off your initial investment. It's not good for the environment. The industry is young and booming, and it doesn't have a maintenance budget. So those were my main points. You wanted to speak about nuclear at some stage.
Yes. Let's get back to nuclear. Now, Coburg in Cape Town is basically off the grid at the moment because of all the chamos that they've caused there. When we talk about nuclear, because you're dealing with nuclear stuff, you've got to be so careful when it comes to maintenance, don't you?
Not really. The misunderstanding is which part of the nuclear radiation is dangerous, and the waste itself isn't. Look, you hide it under the ground and they produce very little of it, but the more dangerous waste, there's very small amounts of it. You make it in a metal case and you lock it away. But the safety features of nuclear isn't. Again, it's exaggerated. The fears of it is as exaggerated probably as the benefits of solar. And the fact that solar is more green, it's the same level of exaggeration, it looks like to me.
Yeah.
But I don't think the fears against nuclear is significant.
Yeah, I just...
balanced by the greenness of solar.
Yeah. Look, there was that nuclear plant, the nuclear power plant that blew up in northern Ukraine. I'm just trying to think of its name.
I can't help you at the moment.
Yeah, remember when it blew up and they were worried about which way the wind was going to blow because of the radiation and stuff?
Yeah, that's not... people, that's misunderstood. That type of radiation, it's not... You need to be exposed directly to very high levels of a specific radiation for it to be dangerous. It's really not dangerous in that form. Even nuclear explosions like Fukushima and those guys, the danger is not really in the radiation, it's in the heat and the actual explosive nature of it. So anyway, that's controversial. That's a lovely and controversial topic, but I can't get to it.
But I thought at Fukushima the big problem there was the actual water, because they had so much water which was basically bursting with radiation. And when...
These things are very complicated, but people have drunk that water and lived in the area for years with nothing going wrong with them. So again, it's the romanticization of solar is comparable to the demonization of radiation.
Right.
Yes.
So I guess what we could say in summary, Viv, is that you don't regret having solar, but there are some tricks and traps, aren't there?
Yes, there are some tricks and traps, and I do think I was foolish in buying into the romance of it so quickly and being blind to the non-greenness of it. Yeah, it's like, what the hell was I thinking? How can this be green? Because you're blinded by the sun.
Yeah.
And you don't turn around and look at your roof.
But isn't it funny that here you are, we're talking about the vagaries of solar, and here you are, the only house in the street with the lights on because of solar. So it's...
Yeah, exactly. There are no solutions. There are only trade-offs.
Yeah.
But with deep respect to myself, I also have a generator, a gas stove, a Plan D, and a gas geyser. So I am just that type of person.
Yeah.
Having said that, I wouldn't be able to plug my computer into the gas stove.
Yeah. Now, you Okay, we're both sort of, I guess you could say, over 50s, and
Yes.
when we look back at the old South Africa, I mean, they never used to have these sort of problems like Eskom have today. In fact, I think back in the early 1990s, Eskom was voted as the most efficient power producer in the world. And if you look what's happening to the traditional Eskom electricity, it's really gone through the floor, hasn't it?
Yeah, I can't really comment on that. I think the situation is, I don't know how they were voted the best supplier and to what percentage of the population. Or I could show you the transformation from gas stove to DB board to inverter.
That was back in the 1990s. I read it somewhere that Eskom was voted the best power supplier in the world. And
well, for them.
Yeah, and I think it was also the pricing was pretty good back then, because today they push it up like 20% a year, the price of power.
Yeah, I think it's a bigger problem than Eskom, obviously, and still in connection with Africa, the people who live here now, who moved in from the suburbs or Northern Africa, even with what I complain about my electricity, it's still better than where they come from. So it's a difficult comparison to make.
Yeah, well, I live in Australia, and I don't think I could live in South Africa with all this load shedding. My work, I depend on having electricity 24/7, and we don't have load shedding. We don't have blackouts. We don't have any issues with electricity. We've had, I think, twice in my life, and I've been in Australia for 40 years, have I had a situation where the power was off. And one was quite recent, but that was because they were doing major maintenance on an electricity line, and that was done in the middle of the night. So most people weren't affected. And apart from that,
So a South African connection then?
Oh, I grew up in South Africa.
For the 15 years then? So you left as a teenager?
No. I was about 32 when I came to Australia.
Okay, so you're a toppie then. So if you say so,
I'm an old toppie. Yeah.
Okay, so it's okay.
They call me the old fart on this program.
Well, why not? Okay, so you from? I'm just trying to understand your question then. Okay, from 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So you've been out of the country as long as I've lived in this house. So I can say that the migration of the type of people who live in the street, while not as spectacular as the migration of the wildebeest across the Serengeti, is as fascinating if you're interested in that type of thing. So where I live was started 40 years ago, or as long as I've lived here, was for small family units. So you'd have 4 or 6 people for white people. And over the years, slowly as the country opened up and people migrated from the townships, we now have a density in my street in the past few years that more closely resembles the upper areas of a township. Wow. So people have bought these old yards. It's dark now, I can't show you, but we have these old yards that's quite large, and they're fruit trees and stuff. So all the trees are off, and they built rooms for rent. So we have now a very densely populated street. That's why we also have electricity problems. So I can comment on it from that type, but it's a natural and it's an important migration. And to most of the people living here, it's a massive improvement of their life in the townships.
Yeah.
Because even with the interruptions here, it's better than they had. And they have that nice, there's trees and there's gardens that are close to the shopping centers, and it's relatively more safe. But it's a completely different street to the one that I grew up in. We only have 3 or 4 white families left who still have that family unit.
Yeah.
And that's how we associate with these houses. But to the people, most of the people living here now, it's just rooms. There are 20 rooms in a backyard, whereas we had none. So it's a very interesting urban migration. that I'm privileged to have witnessed, but of course nobody can predict. And it brings with it infrastructure pressures which we weren't prepared for.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of these rooms have illegal connections to the power lines.
Oh, 100%. And you must remember what I call illegal, because that's my culture and background. They don't understand it. They don't experience it as illegal at all. Why must I pay if I can just go to the pole and connect? I'm paying the landlord, so what's the issue? There's a completely and fascinating cultural clash that I'm experiencing now, like in the meeting that I had, that you have different words to describe things. So if we say, but you're overloading the system, they hear white people are racist because they say we have too many children, that we have too many people living in the rooms.
Ah, right. So the way they take it.
100%, because we come from a culture where there are rules and there's a government that works, and you sign a petition and illegal stuff must be rooted out. They don't see it like that at all.
That's
and
fascinating.
It's mind-blowing, and that I am allegedly a liberal and a writer, and you suspect these things, but when you're confronted with it in such a clear fashion on a street corner in the dark, then you go, holy fuck,
am I going to be safe?
Living, if I've not been concentrating, we have living for 50 years. I don't know these people at all, but I've been living in the same street for 20 years.
Wow. Yeah, now look, I've always said that I've got this theory that the reason things have gone so pear-shaped in South Africa is really the fruits of the limitations of the language that the Bantu and Nguni people grew up with, because they don't have words, for example, for maintenance or the future and things like that, so they have no concept of these things.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with you on two things.
Yeah.
A, that it's pear-shaped. It's not pear-shaped for the people in my street.
Yeah, I get that, yeah, because their lives have got better.
But I'm saying that's part of the problem, that we see things completely differently. So for most of the people in South Africa, things are going better for them.
Yeah.
For most people in South Africa. Now, people like me experienced more shaped of it, but for most people, the pear is in a lacquer shape. So that's the first thing. Then I don't think it's necessarily a lack of language, but the Nguni and Western cultures have a different way of thought. And they're not necessarily better or worse, but they don't understand maintenance. That concept that you mentioned is not valuable to them.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're destructive. It just doesn't matter. We as a Western culture, and I'm going to ask you to speak to a professor, Kirsten Krauss, who studied this. We have an outcomes-based view of the world, a linear outcomes-based view of the world, and they more have a loyalty group-based view of the world. It's not better. Well, in my street we have Ubuntu in the opposite direction. The yellow people make the blue and red people also have nothing. So we're going Ubuntu, Lapa side.
You all come down.
Yeah, that in itself is a difficult concept, but we just have completely, the Western culture have a linear outcomes-based look of life, and Nguni just don't. So that's why if you say to them, yes, but you didn't follow the rules, they're like, why are you talking like that? So it's deeper than words. It's a way of viewing the world that is different, and I think where my culture has done wrong is by not attempting to understand it better. And I can see what the white people in my street have done completely wrong is going into these very difficult negotiations about the electricity without listening. Yeah. We have not taken an effort to figure out how to present ourselves to the rest of the group in a way that's meaningful to them. Not that we think we are right. What are you going to say in a way that doesn't antagonize them towards you? Because we just barge in, near lekker. I'm an individual, I will stamp my feet. Well, my friend, you're going to come second. Yeah. Because you never took the time to learn how to listen.
Now, you've just mentioned that the volume of people living in your street has just exploded. Do do you ever fear about crime happening, especially seeing that you've got a solar and they say, oh, she must be rich?
It's absolutely. So I do have, and that's what I explain to people. My fear, my problem is not electricity. It's this social pressure. And again, this is something white people feel. The black people understand, and please, I'm using the word black and white loosely because we don't have time for longer things. They are used to this pressure. They are used to paying extra levies to the electricity mafia. It's just for us that this social pressure and people finding you different is so overwhelming. But to them, crime and this type of thing is a natural thing. So for me, yes. And it's very uncomfortable for me to live in a community that I don't fit in anymore. But that is a personal problem that I understand, and that the electricity mafia here, now the more powerful they become, the more arrogant they become, and they're men, so they exert power by physical threat or pressure, and I might become a victim of that. But I'm going to be clear that it's an individual problem I have. For the rest of the people, this type of stuff is normal. Just for me, it's unusual.
That's a really, really interesting observation, that crime and violence is just like part of their lives, whereas in our culture it's taboo. You just don't
follow
want
the
to.
rules. Yeah. So for me, what these guys are doing is criminal. For most of the people here, well, that's how they're on the townships. We've never known how to not live without paying a levy to somebody who's not the government. But for us now, it's more of a shock now to be exposed to this. Well, most people, it's still better than what they had in the township.
Have you thought of moving to another area? Because it sounds like...
Yeah, so for people like me, that is your first thought, and everybody wants to move to Cape Town, but of course it's not easy. And you can't afford it. You can't just leave.
Yeah.
It's a simple solution, but you can't just leave. So again, nothing is easy.
Wow. It really is fascinating talking to you, because you raised a couple of issues where you obviously have quite, even though you don't have a lot of contact with the community that you live with, you have enough to actually be able to observe these differences and explain them.
Absolutely. And and I've said to my community this clearly on WhatsApp is, these are amongst the most important and profound conversations I've ever had in my life, and I wish we'd done it sooner. I can't believe that we haven't done it. And the pressure from the group, especially from the criminals, or my words, criminal, is one voice. An injury to one is an injury to all. So we can't point fingers at the illegal people, because an injury to one is an injury to all. And to try and convince them, so my answer is just, no, I think we must fight. I don't think we must agree. The value is in us disagreeing, because the mafia guys try and use unity as a pressure mechanism.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's keep on thanking people for fighting with me and being rude to me, because I think it's fantastic. At least as long as we talk.
Are these electricity mafia living in your street, or are they from another area?
From another area and living, but the way they operate, and that again is a cultural thing, their power is people. So again, Western culture, we have rules and a linear way. Their power is groups, or the psychology of loyalty and communalism and a tribalism. So it's not about what's right or wrong, is will I be acknowledged by the group. So they put, I can't even remember your question, but what my answer is relevant is that their power is in group pressure. So they will create a little emotional pyramid scheme where neighbors put pressure on each other to comply. So the way you get drawn into it is that let's say the electricity goes off, or they engineer it to go off, or they have an illegal connection that makes a trip, they will organize a collection where every house has to pay $500, otherwise they don't replace the circuit breaker. And then they go door to door and they knock, and you have to give the money, and they put your name on a piece of paper, and they say, these are all the houses that have paid. Now, you see your name like that on a WhatsApp group, or your name is not on the list, the rest takes care of itself. So that's how the power pyramid scheme, that pressure system works. And the moment people pay, they're all complicit. That's your main trick. By the way, if you ever want to take over street with electricity, your main thing is not electricity. It is compliance and fear. Because the moment people are part of the thing, that's it. They don't do anything. They put the domino in order, and the people put pressure on each other to do it. Very clever.
So you got ringleaders as well.
Well, I suppose. Look, our guys, it feels like our guys were the first people to do it, but they might be branching out to other streets. So they're not that sophisticated yet. And we're a small street. So I don't know the inside of them so well, but they have 2 specific houses that many people live in, and they just somehow stick together, and the rest don't. So the gang that is more glued together will outrank the loose collection of individuals like us who are complaining.
Wow. Okay. Gee, that's a very, very interesting way at looking at, because when you look what happens in the townships, and I get a lot of videos because of the work that I do, and what I've noticed is that when you've got a group of let's say Zulus or Xhosa in a like a township or in a camp, and as a group they can commit the most atrocious violence against a person, or like necklacing and stuff like that. And while this is all happening, the women are going whoa, 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 in the background. It's sort of like, yeah, go for it, go for it, go for it. It just seems like they as a group, they seem to change from when they're just like, the guy comes to do your garden, and he's he's very nice, and yeah.
Look, that is probably a very racist thing you said, and a very bigoted thing you said, but also has some truth in it. I think where it's correct, I don't think they're more violent than any other groups. I don't think that the Spanish or the Afrikaner that are any less violent, but you do touch on a concept where their behavior seems to be motivated by a loyalty to the group rather than what we think are rules and what is right and wrong.
Yeah.
So I would agree with that, but the rest, you just have pretty racially slanted to most people, probably.
But it's the only way to discuss it is to just sort of put it out there.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll give you an example, Viv. My mother was the mayor's personal assistant in Greytown. Okay, now Greytown is in the northern part of KwaZulu-Natal. And over Christmas especially, there used to be faction fights in the Chigela River Valley, where you'd have one little village would take on the other village and literally wipe out everybody in the other village. And when that happened, we would hear the army helicopters going over Greytown. And then my mother would come in the next day, because she was the mayor's PA, and say, guess what? There was another faction fight last night. And, so many people were killed, and et cetera, et cetera. And these were like little grudge fights because, maybe while someone was working on the mine, his wife had an affair with a guy at another village, and of course that village got together and took out the village where that happened.
Sure. So I think in terms of tribalism, their tribes seem to be small and therefore recognizable, but white culture just have bigger and more organized tribes that wipe out entire civilization. So sure. So I don't think it's, we just more organized with our violence.
Yeah,
probably.
Look at Ukraine.
Yeah, we also made it. Listen, if you want to talk about violence and gang warfare, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
but I do think that that it is fair to say that the judgment system, that we have a concept of individual responsibility. With them, the concept is replaced with loyalty.
right.
It's a slightly different dynamic, and that is why a linear and a rules-based and legality here doesn't carry as much weight. And trust me, when you're a person like me who voted DA and all of that, suddenly shocked to find it means nothing to them.
Yeah. Well, the reason I brought up the faction fights was because my mother came home one evening and she said, guess what? One of the people who was arrested for slaughtering the people in the other village was a professor at the University of Witwatersrand.
100%.
And I said, how could that happen? How can a professor get involved in this? But now you're explaining why it happens.
Sure, well, my brothers were all members of the special forces.
Yeah.
So they keep people by instructions. I'm not going to cause any dispersion, and that is an interesting fact. How we decide when killing is barbaric as opposed to patriotic or expanding a business empire. These are just very random rules that we make to make ourselves feel better about the fact that we're killing others. It's very random context we add to it.
Yeah.
What's the difference between what my people did and the professor did for a Joel on a Saturday? You just convince yourself you're always better.
You know, it's a fascinating subject, and I know it's sort of a touchy subject, and I'm not looking at this from a racial perspective at all. I'm looking at it from a cultural perspective, and the point that you raise about it being loyalty to the group, whereas with
the Afrikaners have that in buckets. So definitely the Afrikaners and the Zulus have a very close emotional connection to each other. We understand each other.
Yeah.
En luister hierso, jy moet met my kom kok soek, my mense sal jy uithaal. So we do understand it.
Yeah.
Because we were both in that way, that linear way that the British had, was so far ahead of the rest of us. But we both came into it as underlings. You must remember the Afrikaners were the blacks when the British came in the Boer War. We were lower than slaves to them.
Yeah.
We were barbarians to them. So I think a lot of us, we still understand that. We definitely understand that more than people who grew up in a more British environment.
Yeah. We are so far off the subject. I don't know how we got onto this, but it really is interesting.
I think it was the DB board. Well, it's electricity. It connects everyone, and it forces you. Electricity is the lifeblood. I describe it in my next article. I'm describing it as the new gold rush on the East Rand. Because gold was found here in Germiston in 1886. It's a new gold rush. The electricity is a natural resource now for you to stake your claim like in the Wild West. You simply go to the substation, force the door open, and claim it.
Yeah.
Electricity is the new gold.
Well, let me put this argument to you. Electricity, although it can be horribly inconvenient if you don't have it, you can still live without it. And the other huge issue happening in Gauteng right now is drinking water. You know, I know in Krugersdorp, for example, they haven't had water for days because of maintenance that's taking place. So, you know, when you talk about the water side, what's happening with you in Germiston? Have you got water?
We do have water, but as I explained also recently in another interview, is the electricity wars and the electricity mafia here is nothing. I'm privileged to be living in a place where I don't have power for 2 weeks. Can you imagine when it becomes water?
Yeah, that's exactly the thing, because you can't live without water for more than a few days.
Now, this what I have is still privilege compared to what might happen, 100%.
Yeah. Viv, look, it's been lovely talking to you, and we've, as I say, we've gone on to a whole lot of unrelated topics, but it's lovely to just have an informal chat and just discuss things. I,
Oh,
we've been going for about an hour, so we, time flies when you're having fun. Is there something you'd like to just say in wrapping up this live stream?
no, not at all. But if you want I do think the topics are fascinating. I don't know what the scope is of your audience, but I do think that I have more stories to tell about the mechanics of what's happening with infrastructure in my street as it relates to the country, and I have other stories about old cars and what's important.
Oh, you got a beautiful old car, 1969.
Yeah, no, and I also aim to be South Africa's first motivational speaker, so we can talk about the importance of not cleaning your room or making your bed. These are important things.
Yeah.
So, if you ever want to.
Yeah. Look, we'll definitely get you back and have another little informal chat, which is lovely. But I want to thank you because I've actually learnt quite a bit from what you said tonight regarding the way the Nguni culture think, and it's as you say, it's a loyalty, it's a group, and it's a totally different mindset.
Sure, and I'm going to give your producer Kirsten Krause's number because I reached out to him, not because I'm an expert, by the way, just because I understood that I'm dealing with such a cultural divide that I have no knowledge of, and then he gave me some pointers. Look, I don't know what to do with that knowledge, but I wished I had it sooner. So talk to him, and that's going to be interesting. And then we all learn like this together, and it might make a difference or it might not. But to me, it's fascinating. I just wish I didn't live here.
Yeah. Now, are there other people in your street that you know, like friends with, who might be from Zimbabwe or from different groups?
Let me do some research and see who you might want to talk to and whether their input is.
Well, I was thinking of having like a little town hall discussion where you might have someone from Zimbabwe, someone from perhaps Zululand, just a group of say 3 or 4 people talking about life in Germiston, because then you'd get all these different perspectives, which would be really fascinating.
Yeah, let me see if I can line that up. I'm not sure that I'm connected enough in the community to just pull that off. Of course, the person I really want to speak to is the Pharaoh, or the leader of the thing in our street, because he's a fascinating character.
What, the electricity guy?
Can you, let's say I call him the Pharaoh because it's really a personality thing. There's a guy, he's just decided I'm taking over done. He's just a giant ego. But the balls of a person to just decide, that's it, that's my plan, I'm doing it. And of course I want to speak to him about more than a few things. But let's see. First things first, I'll try and a few people.
Yeah, look, keep in touch with Marlena, and let's have those discussions, because I think that'll give us a far better understanding of what's happening in the suburbs of Johannesburg, because there, as you say, there's a huge influx of people from the townships into the suburbs, and it's changing the whole way it works and runs. Completely.
The townships have come to the suburbs.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yep. Wow, I'd never thought of it that way. It's really, and you're living in one of those streets where it's actually happening, so
100%. So we're pioneers here, not by choice, but just by example.
Yeah. All right, Viv, thank you so much for joining me tonight, and have a great evening, and I look forward to our next chat.
Thank you.
Okay, and just work with Marlena. Okay. All right, guys, that was Viv Vermaak, and we certainly got off the subject, but it was very, very interesting talking to her. And can you guys hear me at the moment? I'll just put here, if you can hear me. Yeah, if you can hear me, type 1. because I've just changed to another scene, and I'm just going to turn that up. Okay, I hope you can hear me now. Alrighty, have a great evening, everybody. I'm going to go out with Hier Bly Ek Boer, and don't forget, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, we'll have another live stream. And if you go to our new YouTube channel, which is linked at the top of lovinglivetv.com, make sure you register there. If you go to that top link, you'll actually go to the temporary YouTube channel we're using at the moment, because YouTube have blocked my live streams. Can you believe it? Just my live streams on the other main, I call it the main, but it's just a supplementary channel to Loving Live TV. Alright guys, you can all hear me, that's good to hear. Alright, let's go out with Hier Bly Ek Boer. Have a great evening, everybody. See you tomorrow night, 8 p.m. And if I don't see you through the week, like that old taxi program said, I'll see you through the window. Take care.
Meer as 61.000 van ons voorvaders het op die grens vir ons gesterwe, sodat ons vry kan wees. Die is my land, die is my reg. Hier is ek boer. Stof is ek gemaak en sal ek terugkeer. Die Bybel is die woord waaruit ek leer, soos die grond op die aarde. Hier bly ek boer. Soos diep in die nag sal die vyand kom, maar hier bly ek staan en ek draai nie om, want jy maak my nie bang nie. Hier bly ek boer. Die is my land waarvoor ek sal veg. Die is my bloed, my sweet, my reg. Die is die plek waar my voorvaders leef. Die is my land, hoor wat ek jou sê. Wat my mense voor, hier bly ek voor. Soos bladam in die somer wat vreugde bring, my oupa wat maniekie roe kon sing, soos hy stap deur die lande, hier was hy boer. My wortels lê diep in die grond geplant, my siel soos my pa los ek vir jou die land, en jy hoef nie te vrees nie, hier sal jy boer. Die is my land waarvoor ek sal veg. Die is my bloed, my sweet, my reg. Die is die plek waar my voorvaders leef. Die is my land, hoor wat ek jou sê. Die is my land, wat my mense voor, hier bly ek voor. Die leeu sal kom, 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 die leeu sal kom.